Well, the Atlanta Braves do decide to make some changes with their coaching staff, firing hitting coach Kevin Seitzer. Does this also mean that they'll look to change their offensive approach? We'll discuss all of that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below, as it does help out the show a ton. Whenever you do those things, you're listening on the audio version, you can help me out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, I appreciate your support here at Locked On Braves, making us your first listen of each and every day. Well, as would be the case, I leave to go on vacation. I already recorded a podcast talking about the Atlanta Braves, saying that they're not going to make any coaching changes, and then they do decide to make some coaching changes. So we'll discuss all of that on today's episode. Who some candidates could be. Chipper Jones, maybe. We'll talk about that and some of his comments with the changes. And we'll get into the postseason picture as well, happening right now in the CS part of the postseason, happening right now for both the American League and National League. And you can start the NFL season out with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As I said in the open there, as would be the case, I leave, I pre-record an episode, go on vacation, and immediately some pretty big news happens as the Atlanta Braves fired 3 coaches last Thursday, most notably hitting coach Kevin Seitzer, along with assistant hitting coach Bobby Magallanes and catching coach Sal Pisano. Now, they plan to replace both Kevin Seitzer, the hitting coach, and the assistant hitting coach position. They have said that they're not going to replace Sal Pisano in his catching coach job, rather. That one I don't quite understand. There obviously hasn't been as much talk or commotion about that one. They're not planning on replacing him, so certainly Braves aren't necessarily viewing it as a big deal. But, I mean, there was a lot of talk about, how great of a job he did with the catchers here. And, again, we don't know. We're going to have to wait until we get some more media availability, but wonder if that's just a situation of he was ready to hang it up. If he gets on somewhere else and gets a job somewhere else, that will be very interesting. But for everything that I know and have heard about Sal Pisano is that everybody loved him and that he did a great job with the catchers. So again, that's a little bit of a more curious one, but I think the one that most people want to hear about and talk about is obviously Kevin Seitzer getting fired and getting let go, because he's been there for 10 years. He was the longest tenured hitting coach, which I think should tell you that this job is one that rotates a lot. Look, it's a lot easier to fire coaches, to blame coaches when the team's not doing well. And when players aren't performing, even at the professional level, it's just easier to blame the coaches. And it's why you see hitting coaches, pitching coaches get swapped out. And Kevin Seitzer had been here for a while with the Braves and done a great job. I mean, they have been one of the best offenses in baseball for a while prior to this year. They have been one of the better offenses in the league. In 2023, he won the Baseball America's MLB Coach of the Year award. And 2023 is 1 year ago, and when he was leading a historic offense. Now, in an interview that he did with David O'Brien of The Athletic, brought to light some other things that maybe Seitzer was dealing with off the field, both on the field as well. Apparently, his wife went through a major medical issue in 2023, so that caused him to miss some time with the team in order to be with her. His wife is fully healthy now, and that is certainly great to hear. But at 63, and with that happening, you just wonder if maybe he wanted to hang it up. And we'll see again if it lashes on with another team and continues coaching. But it sounds like he is unsure about his future, if he wants to continue coaching at all. And so maybe that was part of the decision making. He also said in that article with The Athletic that he has no ill will towards the Braves or Alex Anthopoulos. He even says that he doesn't blame Alex for the firing. He called 2023 the hardest of his career, which is understandable with what we now know that he was dealing with off the field and with all the injuries that his offense was dealing with on the field, I can very much believe that this was the hardest season for him that he's had coaching. And obviously that kind of played out with what you saw on the field. One interesting comment from Seizter talking about the next coach and what they'll have to deal with, and something that they'll have to do a better job of than Seitz was able to do this year, is that he said the new coach would have to work on developing the mental aspect of the game for the players, which became a struggle this past season with so many guys trying to do too much to make up for the injured players. And I'm paraphrasing the quote there from Kevin Seitzer, but it makes a lot of sense. I talked about it a lot this year. You could see it in at-bats. It was up and down the lineup. Guys just trying to do too much, especially in those clutch situations. We talk about Sean Murphy on here a lot, and it hasn't been for good reasons this year. But Sean Murphy with nobody on or a runner on first, I feel like his at-bats, and again, I'm picking on Sean Murphy just because I was keyed in on him a lot this year. His at-bats with a runner at first or nobody on just seem a lot better. I'm not always saying the results are much better. I didn't go back and try to verify that, but it feels like they were so much better and locked in than when there was a runner in scoring position. When there was a runner in scoring position, you just seemed like he was down 0-2. And again, I'm picking on Sean Murphy. You can go up and down the lineup. Matt Olson did it at times. I think Ozuna did it at times. Up and down the order. There were guys this year who were trying to do too much, especially in those clutch situations. And as the season went on, I think it just became a mental thing, a mental hurdle for this offense that they just could not overcome. And whatever message that Kevin Seitzer was trying to relay, it wasn't getting through. And again, is that on him? Is that on the player? I think that's the tough thing for me to really figure out as a fan, who's not there hearing those conversations. How much blame do I really put on the coach? And I've talked about this when I thought the Braves weren't going to do anything. How much do you really put on the coach at the professional level? I put more of it on the players. Again, it's easier to get rid of a coach than a player. But I can fully understand and see what Seitzer is talking about, where I think the mental aspect of the game this year just became too much of a hurdle for players to overcome, trying to do too much because of all the injuries, trying to make up for Acuna being down, trying to make up for Michael Harris, Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies, all these guys that were down at one time or another. And you could just see players pressing. And especially as the season went on, the at-bats weren't getting better with runners in scoring position. They were getting worse. And I think that's as a result of guys just trying to do too much. So why the sudden pivot here to make a change? Again, this was an offense that was historically one of the best offenses in all of baseball, in the history of the game in 2023. They suffered a ton of injuries in 2024, and now we're going to blow up that coaching staff. Again, I'm okay with the decision depending on where we go. And again, we weren't privy to those conversations and what was said in the evaluation. We don't know yet quite what direction the Braves want to go in. It does seem like a bit of a knee-jerk reaction from a 1 year after being one of the best offenses in baseball for a long stretch, after being historically one of the best offenses ever, and then suffering a year of injuries like we've never seen on the offensive side, at least, to then just blow up the coaching staff seems like a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Again, we'll see which direction they go. And I'm not necessarily mad at it, again, depending on where they go. And they said after the season that they'd like to have the entire coaching staff back. So why make the move now? Did something change? If you listen to the actual audio at the end of the season, when Snit and A were asked about the coaching staff changes, he said, do you want to bring the entire coaching staff as is, back as is? Snit says immediately, yes, as of right now, kind of leaving that door open a little bit. And then AA kind of just deflects and says, that's Snit's staff. However, a little bit further on, ultimately, he says the expectation is that they'll be back. However, they had not begun their evaluation process at that point, as the season had just ended when that question was asked. And, they said they did it now to give those guys a chance to land a job somewhere else. And again, I'm very curious to see, does Seizter go somewhere else? Does Sal Pisano go somewhere else? Or do those guys just hang it up? And if that was possibly part of the conversation, that maybe those guys were deciding to hang it up a little bit. We won't know. Again, we won't right now, at least till we have another media availability to ask some of these questions. But I would be interested to know if that was part of the reasoning for letting, at least Seizter and Fasano go. Again, Fasano one, I think it's just, I don't know why you would let him go. Certainly I thought the catchers have been great for the Atlanta Braves for several years, unless that was just a mutual decision that Fasano either wanted to hang it up or, wanted to go somewhere else, and they're not replacing that position. But again, the bigger spot here is obviously the hitting coach job and what they're going to do. And with Seizter now gone, is there going to be a change in approach? What did Chipper Jones' comments have to do with this decision, if any? We'll discuss that here next. Do you love getting money back on things that you're going to buy anyway? Of course you do. Why would you not? Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $145 per year. That can cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game that you're dying to go to, or that fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join the over 50 million savers and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen of today. Go make your second listen to Locked On MLB podcast, where Sully is catching you up with everything happening around the MLB postseason. You can find that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every week. Later this week on the podcast, we'll get back into our player season review and previews for the upcoming offseason for those players. Probably get into Orlando Arcia next, talk about him a lot, as well as some others that we have here that we want to get to the rest of the way. So a lot of that coming your way this week on the podcast. Looking forward to getting back into those. But let's get back into our conversation here with the coaching staff changes. Is a change in philosophy coming? That's your initial thought when you see this move happening. When you have a season like the Braves just had offensively, it was painful. It honestly was. It was very painful. It made it hard to watch this team night in and night out with just how bad the offense was. And when you have a season like that and you see the coaching, the hitting coach get fired, you immediately wonder, is a change in philosophy coming? The Braves have built this team. They have built this identity on slug first, swing for the fences, 2 strike counts, doesn't really matter. Swing for the fences, hit all the home runs that you can. We'll never know, again, what was said in these evaluation meetings. If, maybe there was a different approach in where the team wanted to go and where the hitting coaches thought that they could go and what they thought they were capable of teaching. And we really won't have any idea of what direction the Braves are heading in offensively until they hire someone, which I don't expect to happen anytime soon. Probably not until at least after the season is done. And even then, we might not know until we see the offense in action next year. From Seizter's own comments, it sounds like the message that he was trying to get through to the team just wasn't getting through in 2023. And so maybe the Braves just thought that the team needs a new voice. Seizter's been there a while. He's been there 10 years. All these guys have heard what he has to offer. Maybe it's just time for a new voice. And that very well could be and might be the most likely scenario for what happened here is that, Seizter has given this team 10 years. Again, he was the longest tenured hitting coach in baseball. And it might just be time for a new voice. And that might be as simple as that. In fact, if I had to guess right now, and again, we don't know, that's probably what I would say is the case. Is the team just wanted to get a new voice in there for these guys who have been hearing the same voice for a long time. I know a lot of fans, including myself, are hoping that there is some sort of change to be a more balanced team with power, contact, and speed. Right now it's an all-power approach from this team. However, if you go back to 2023, when everyone was healthy, they were top 10 in home runs, average, and stolen bases. Although over half of those stolen bases came from one man. But going back just to 2023, they were top 10 in power, contact, and speed. So, again, it's just, and they also had the sixth fewest strikeouts in 2023. Is 2023 an outlier? Again, it's not like that's the only year this offense has been good, but you have to get back to more of that. And again, it's just hard to quantify. That's why I understand why they made the decision, and I'm not trying to say that it wasn't needed, but it is just a little perplexing that this offense was everything that you wanted in 2023 when healthy. You get ravished by injuries in 2024, and you're not the offense that you built, that you wanted to be, and now we're going to blow it. It's hard for me to imagine them actually changing anything, because what you have done for the past 6 years prior, maybe we not go back as far as 6 years, those 2018 teams, 2019 teams weren't quite as offensively heavy as they have been the last 3 or 4 years before 2024, but you had built a juggernaut of an offense when healthy. So I don't think the philosophy is really going to change. I don't think they're going to all of a sudden say, let's change our approach from what has been working when healthy. Let's change our approach from what we have built here. And as I've stated multiple times, hitting home runs is the right move. It is the most efficient way to score. In today's environment, that is what plays into scoring the most runs. Again, I don't feel like I need to explain that any further. For some of you, maybe still don't understand that. Hitting home runs is the most optimal way to score. You look at the 4 teams left in the postseason, and 3 of them finished in the top 6 in home runs. The Guardians finished 12th in home runs, so they were still top half of the league, but they were also 5th in stolen base and had the 4th fewest strikeouts, so they were able to score in other ways as well. Again, I don't want to keep rehashing 2024, but that was the problem, is that it was a lineup that was built on hitting a ton of home runs and not really worrying about scoring in any other ways. You get devastated by injuries. Your offense has to change, and they never did. And I think that's probably part of why the coaching staff is gone, is because they were never able to adjust and get the players to adjust to what needed to happen for this team to be successful in 2024 with all the injuries. But again, make no mistake, scoring home runs or hitting home runs is the best way and most efficient way to score. Again, I feel like that's an obvious statement, but that approach and what they have built works in today's game. It works. Yankees, Dodgers, Mets, all top 6 in home runs this year, still in the postseason. And those 3, I think, would be considered the favorites to win it all right now, because they hit home runs and they can score. And so that is what you want. And that's what the Braves have built. Also, just think they're not going to change up their offensive philosophy now after one bad year with all the injuries they had. Again, I think at the end of the day, this is just my personal opinion, we do not have, we do not know what took place in those conversations. We don't know which way Alex is going. But I think this is more of just getting a new voice in here to try to help these guys, look at things a different way. But I do think with that, I hope with that there is also this approach for a more balanced attack offensively and putting more emphasis on putting the ball in play, changing up your approach in certain situations. I don't need Austin Riley going up there the first couple of pitches of an at bat, looking to poke a single the other way. And let Austin Riley get his A hack off and see if he can get a 2-run home run, somebody on base. Same for Matt Olson. But in a clutch situation with a runner on base, runner on second, 1 out, 2 strikes, I need you to try to put the ball in play and see if you can get a weak hit to drive in a run. See if you can at least move the runner over, get him to third base with 2 outs and give you a chance to score on a pass ball. There has to be more of a mindset to do the little things. You can't always just count on that 2-run, 3-run home run, especially when it comes to the postseason. I think that's another part of this too, is yes, the Braves offense has been really good in the regular season the past several years, but it has come to a halt in the postseason. And I think part of that is just because of that all or nothing approach. In the postseason, when you're facing the best pitchers every game, they haven't been able to adjust to that, to do the little things to score in different ways. So no, I don't think they're going to give up on the, slug first approach, but my hope is that there will still be a little bit more of a mindset of doing the little things right to be able to score in different ways. That's my hope. And again, we'll have to see who they hire and who they bring in. Speaking of which, could it be Chipper Jones? Maybe it's Brian Snitker's son, Troy, who's with the Astros. We'll discuss that here next. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. If you go over to FanDuel.com right now, look at the World Series odds for 2024. The Yankees are the favorite, followed by the Dodgers close behind them, the Mets, and I was right earlier, the Guardians are the least favorite to win the World Series, and they're down right now to the Yankees as we record on Monday night. And what do those top 3 teams do? Well, they hit home runs. It's exactly what you want your offense to do. And again, you can check all that out at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/PlaySafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so let's look at a couple of candidates, a couple of names that have been mentioned. I've seen a lot of you mention it already in the comments section. Those who are here with me live: Garrett, Mass, Braves Thrills, Lauro, Miguel. We got a lot of regulars in here today. Docs Cards, I see you out there. Thank you all for joining here live. Jeff Berry, Thax Shelley, thank you all for being here with me live. Chipper Jones, according to David O'Brien of The Athletic, Chipper is not a candidate because he has a lot ongoing in his personal life right now. And that's why he stepped back from the coaching role that he did have initially. He's got a lot of sons. He's helping, coach them, be parts of their lives. That job is going to be there for Chipper Jones when he is ready. And I think he ultimately will want to get into coaching, just wants to spend some time with the family. And that is certainly understandable and certainly something that he should do. And so I'm glad that he's taken the time to do that. But I think this job is his whenever he wants it, whenever he's ready to commit to being a coach, if he ultimately wants to do that. And I think he will. I think he should. I think he's a great, I think he has a great hitting mind. I love hearing him talk hitting when he's on the broadcast. So I think he will eventually, but I just don't think that time is right now. But hey, they've lied to us in the past. Maybe it is going to be Chipper, but I just don't get the sense that's going to be the case right now. Speaking of Chipper, obviously, he had some very strong comments about the Braves hitting philosophy on Corey Kluber's podcast way back when. We talked about that during the season. You want to go back and give that a listen. And I tried to make it clear then what Chipper's comments were not directed towards Kevin Seizter. I felt they were more directed at the front office, and that it's a front office philosophy to focus more on slug than, hit, contact, on base. And so a lot of people thought that maybe Chipper's comments had something to do with this. Chipper posted back on X and said, "What I said on this podcast in no way was meant to smear or undercut the job that Seitz or Maggie were doing. I know that they are preaching. I know what they are preaching, and it was the same stuff that I mentioned. Sometimes it gets through, sometimes it gets ignored. There's no bullying involved here. I love both coaches to death. They are excellent instructors." So again, kind of just echoing the thoughts that, Chipper's comments earlier in the season on that podcast, they were not directed at the coaching staff. It was more about the philosophy and approach that starts at the front office down. And again, kind of what we talked about earlier, I think it's, Seitz was saying these things. He was trying to preach these things. It just wasn't getting through. And that's why I think ultimately this coaching change probably just comes down to having a new voice and maybe just giving these players a new voice that can say it in a different way, that maybe clicks for somebody and gets them going, because clearly whatever was being said this year just wasn't working. And again, how much of that is actually on the coaching? How much of that is on the players just not understanding and not being able to execute what the coaching staff is saying? So again, I fully agree with what Chipper is saying here. I don't think in any way he was taking shots at the coaching staff. I think that was more talking about the team philosophy, which comes from the front office. And I think he's spot on in that. I think Seitz was saying those things. It's just wasn't getting through and the players weren't able to execute it. Now, another possible candidate that a lot of people have been talking about is Brian Snitker's son, Troy Snitker, who is a hitting coach for the Houston Astros. If you don't know, Troy is obviously, as I said, the son of Brian Snitker. He was born in Atlanta, drafted by the Braves in 2011, so plenty of ties to the Braves. He's been one of the Astros hitting coaches since 2019 for coaching at the minor league levels before then. He's obviously, been a really good coach for them. He was reportedly one of the top candidates for the Guardians manager role last offseason before they got Stephen Vogt, and that's turned out pretty well for the Guardians. The Astros have finished in the top 14 in runs scored every year since he was with the club, including leading the league in runs scored in 2021. My question with Troy Snitker as a candidate, does he want to work for his dad? Not every family wants to work together. Could be an awkward relationship. Would he want to work for his dad knowing he might not be around much longer? Again, I am of the belief that Brian Snitker might walk away after next year, which leads to another question. With Troy already interviewing for a managerial job, if Brian Snitker walks away, could Troy be a possible replacement? Does he have, the ability to be a manager? Obviously hasn't done it before, but he has interviewed for a job and been a leading candidate for a job. Could that be a possibility for him to take over for Brian one day? So again, I think he certainly is a candidate and would make some sense. He's had a lot of success there in Houston again, and he's had some interest in being a manager for a major league ball club. So I think obviously the game thinks highly of him, and I think he would be a solid candidate to replace Kevin Seitzer as the Braves hitting coach. I think he'd have to be near the top of the list of coaches out there available. But we'll see again where the Braves go with that. I think it will be a little bit before that happens, although if it is going to be Troy, the Astros are out of the postseason, so that certainly could happen now. But again, I think the Braves will likely wait a little while before that. Now, looking at the championship series matchups happening right now, both the National League and the American League, the NLCS is split 1 game apiece. The Dodgers taking game 1, the Mets taking game 2, as that goes back to Citi Field split there. I don't know who I want to win. Let me know down in the comment section. Who are we cheering for in this postseason? Do you care? I'll be honest, maybe it's because I was on vacation at the beach and I didn't really get to sit down and watch a lot of these games. I watched some of the Dodgers-Padres. I thought the Padres just completely choked that series, but maybe it's just because I really wanted them to win and they let me down. But I really am not that interested in these NLCS, ALCS matchups. And part of that is because I have Fubo TV. And so I don't get TBS. So I've hardly watched any of the American League matchups so far. Listened to some of them on the radio, but they also just haven't been that interesting. It feels like the Yankees are being handed the American League pennant over there. I mean, great stories for the Royals and the Tigers and the Guardians. I think maybe have a little bit of a chance, but feels like the American League's just being handed to the Yankees over there. And then we'll see what happens with the Dodgers and the Mets. I think that could be an entertaining series and a fun one to watch. I don't know. Other than just being a baseball fan and curiously wanting to watch these games, I don't find myself as glued into these matchups as maybe I should be. But let me know down in the comments section, who are you cheering for the rest of the way? I know that we're all wanting the Guardians to just break the media's dream scenario of having the Yankees versus either the Dodgers or the Mets. Either way, that would be a pretty interesting matchup for the media out there to fawn over. But hopefully the Guardians can wreck all of that. But again, I'm just not finding myself that interested in the rest of this postseason. I was loving the wild card matchups and the DS matchups, but I just haven't gotten into these CS matchups so far. But maybe I will as the series go on. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Check out all the postseason action on SiriusXM with the SXM app. And also make sure that you subscribe or follow us on social media at shortstopball at LockedOn_Braves. Again, thanks to Isaac Bowman, Jeffrey Humphreys, Jeff Berry, Laurel Bond, the Scottish Lion in here. Some people calling for Fred McGriff as the new hitting coach. That would be an interesting one. I don't know if he wants to get into coaching or not. I honestly don't know what candidates are out there other than the obvious ones that we discussed here. I really don't have much else for you, but if some more come along, obviously we'll discuss them. But thank you all for joining me here soon, Doc. I'm looking for that card. Haven't gotten it yet, but thank you so much for sending that. But either way, thank you all for joining me here on this episode of Locked On Braves. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button so others can find us and join us here at Locked On Braves. Again, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.